Welcome to Helping Organizations Thrive. Today I have the pleasure of Harini Sreenivasan. Welcome to you, Harini.
Hi, Julian. Absolutely my pleasure to be here.
Good to see you. I'm just going to tell the audience a little bit about you. You are a business transformation evangelist, a design thinker, a neuroscience enthusiast, and a behavioral scientist, adept at unlocking human potential in organizations. And you've got over 24 years of successful experiments in the areas of leveraging people's potential for business agility and excellent. And you're also apart from that, you're a TED Talk. You've done a number of TED Talks, and you're a crusader for zero student suicides. We will be exploring today how to build an awesome workplace organization through trust and transparency. And so, before we get into that, Harini, I'd like to ask you, what do you love about what you do?
That's a fantastic opening question. If you ask me at this moment, I love everything that I do because what I do is building awesome workplaces on which operate on a fundamental behavior of trust and transparency. So that's what I do for a living. That's something that is so close to my heart. It's with absolute conviction that I do. So I'm part of an institute called as Semco Style Institute, based out of Netherlands and present in multiple countries. What we do is transform organizations and help them build a new organizational culture based on trust and transparency. So I love what I'm doing, and probably I could also say that I live what I'm doing because that's my fundamental belief as well.
That's great. Thank you for that. And before we get on to how we build an awesome organization or a workplace culture, from your experience, how would you define what an awesome workplace is, or an awesome place to working? And it's almost completely, in some ways, subjective. But from your experience, from your travels around the world and different organization, what would you put that on as a definition?
Yeah, I'll go to fundamentally what is it that a human being really sees in a workplace? What is it that a human being really enjoys in a workplace? Is it bean bags? Is it snooker tables? Is it flexible work hours? These are all small tools that probably make awesome workplaces. But fundamentally, what is it that a human being is looking for when he wants to say that it's an awesome workplace? Is, am I feeling valued? Am I being valued in the organization? Does the organization look at me for the capabilities that I bring to the table? Is the organization leveraging enough out of me? Am I being valued for what I'm bringing to the table? Am I going back feeling appreciated, feeling content with whatever I've delivered at the workplace? I think even if you have a very simple looking office, no fancy colors on the walls, but if your processes, your organization structure is all designed in a way that people are at the center of it, and every individual goes home feeling as if he or she owns their business, I think that's an awesome workplace in my mind.
Yeah, and I think we often forget in organizations that actually it's made up of people, human beings who have feelings, emotions, needs, and actually that greatest need of feeling valued or feeling that you can make a contribution is quite core. And I think actually focusing on that is a good place to start. As you say, bean bags, free fruit Friday, all these things are all slightly tactical things, but don't really always make people feel valued. And anyway, a lot of people are working in more of a hybrid organization anyway now, so not even in the workplace. So taking that sort of thread of making people feel valued, what do we need to think about to if I was a leader of an organization now, thinking, how do I know I'm making people feel valued? How would you sort of address that sort of question?
I think it fundamentally starts with how the organization is structured, right? Uh, I'm not against having organization charts, but the point I'm trying to make is if your organization chart is showcasing that everything that you do needs to go through so many approvals of people positioned about you in the organization chart, and every decision has to come top down, flowing through so many levels, then the message that we are communicating is we do not value your intellect, we do not value your decision making ability. So, the way an organization is structured, the way communication flows, the way governance mechanisms are designed, I think all of these demonstrate to individuals whether they're being valued or not. It's
Mm.
not enough if you have value statements written on the wall. They remain as words on the wall if they are not translated into action. So if there's a company which has a very flat structure, okay, there's just one boss and everyone reports into that boss, they cannot claim that they are egalitarian, because egalitarian is in the process. Now, if all the dozen people who report into the boss cannot move an inch without the boss's approval,
Mm.
then that flat structure really doesn't make sense. And none of them is being valued for the intellect that they bring in, right? So feeling valued, it starts with how the organization is structured, how communication flows, how
Mm.
processes are, and how governance happens. It's as simple as that.
And it's like, it's empowering people, it's entrusting people with the responsibility that they've been paid to do a role, a job, and actually they're empowered or got the responsibility to actually go off and execute on that, isn't it? And it's almost, it ties into that whole trust piece, doesn't it? And that's quite
Yes,
important, isn't it? And
yes.
it's how we, because when you trust people, there's a risk comes with it, doesn't there? There's always a risk factor. But I always say, if you don't trust people, there's another risk factor. Actually, you don't get things what you'd like to.
Oh,
So
yeah.
let's explore a little bit more about that whole trust piece of why it's important and how we sort of build that. And what have you found some real, I guess, observations of trust in action really within the organizations you've worked with?
Yeah. So you rightly said trusting people sometimes feels difficult because we assume that they are not well informed, they're not experienced, they may make mistakes. So trust is definitely a factor which comes with a lot of other experiences behind it. But let me give you a story. Right? Uh, there was an organization that I was helping them build a culture of trust, and there was a group of people who said, "Okay, here is an important task, and my team members are all fresh out of college. They may not be able to perform it completely because they're not experienced enough. So I'm going to get down there. I'm going to be on my knees, roll up my sleeves, get my hand dirty, and solve the problem for them." Right? So I tried asking that, can you look at the problem? Can you help have conversations with them, equip them with how they find a solution and then move ahead? So manager said, no, 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 that's not possible because I don't have the luxury of time. So let me go ahead and solve it for them. So what is happening in this process is, because the manager did not trust their capability. I'm not talking about trust only as a another word for integrity. I'm talking about trust in the capabilities, right? The manager did not trust in the capabilities of the team members. He went there and solved the problem for them. In the process, what he did, he started building an atmosphere of comfort and apathy. People in the team decided, okay, next time I have something to do, I'm going to sit back. My manager will come and help me do it. So he's actually building a bigger problem. Now, look at the cost of that bigger problem.
Mm.
Had you taken a step back right now and equipped them with information, enabled them to take a decision, even if the decision had failed because you couldn't act quickly, you're at least equipping them to handle similar situations later. Otherwise,
Mm.
the same thing can keep happening again and again, and you're building a culture of complacence and no one taking ownership and accountability, and everybody
Mm.
waiting for somebody to come down and solve the problem. So imagine the cost of that versus the cost of a small delay or a small failure now. And building trust is a two-way street. You cannot get trust of your team unless you demonstrate trust. So here is an opportunity where the manager should demonstrate trust and say, look, folks, I trust you. I trust you, and all that I'm going to do is I'm going to equip you, help you, and together we're going to find a way out. And the moment you demonstrate trust, I think you get it very easily. Often we say that you give trust, and it's a give and take. I would say it's a give and get. You don't even have to take it; it comes back to you. Right?
Mm.
It's a two-way street. So trusting people's capabilities now and helping and enabling them is definitely a smaller loss if there's a delay when you compare with a bigger loss that will happen when people get into a complacent attitude.
Because with trust, it that example you gave there, the manager getting involved, probably he perceived it as me being quicker getting on and doing it, and there's a speed element to it. Actually,
Yes.
trust takes a little bit more time, doesn't it? And it's slightly slower pace, but actually in the long term will benefit you. But it's also, I think, interesting to note that when you trust people, you're signaling that you value what they do, aren't you? And that's
Oh yes.
that's
Oh
going back
yes.
to that
Oh yes.
value piece
And
again, isn't it?
yeah, yes. And that's not a message just to that individual. It's a message which goes to the larger audience, to everyone, saying there was a crisis. The manager trusted the capability of this person. He helped him navigate through that crisis, and of course, he values the individual, and therefore he helped him. So it goes on. So whatever you demonstrate to one individual gets passed on, it gets magnified and passed on to several others, and therefore it's
Mm.
very, very critical to operate in that frame of trust and transparency.
Yeah, because it's the power of role modeling, isn't it? People observe
Oh
more
yes,
than you
absolutely,
realize. Actually, in fact, that's
absolutely,
how people do learn. But
absolutely.
actually, in trusting people and trusting people starts to multiply your capacity, your effectiveness, and also really just create this sense of wow, they're really entrusting with me with this stuff. But also, I think what people also perhaps forget when you whether you however you want to term it, entrust, empower, you still got to support people and give them the right resources, haven't you? You still got to be there, available, and not just sort of throw things at people and off you go and leave you to it. There's an element of dialogue and communication in how you work that process through, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I have a very interesting story. So I was telling a group of uh, family managed business owners recently, and I was telling them about how important it is for leaders to step back, trust in the capability of their teams, and they know how to do their jobs, and trust in their capability and step back. And one of those uh, business owners, was very prompt enough to tell me it doesn't work. So when I probed further, he said, I trusted my team's capability and I went away on a month's vacation. I didn't look in the direction of the office. And when I came back, I noticed that everything was crazily going wrong. And some of them had quit the company and started off as a competitor. So I said, look, it's not washing your hands off. It's about stepping back after equipping them with all the necessary resources,
Hmm.
giving them clear visibility of what is the desired result, and letting them figure out how to get there, and then step back and step in whenever they have a doubt, whenever there is a problem that they couldn't solve, whenever there is a roadblock, whenever there is an obstacle, remove the obstacle and step back again. So, trusting people, letting them work the way they want, is all about stepping back and stepping in and not washing hands off.
Hmm.
That's not, so you can't just dump it on somebody and vanish, because people will still look up to the leader for the richness of experience, the wisdom that they bring with them. So it's not about just because if something goes wrong, who's accountable? You can't hold the people at the periphery of the business accountable for it if they did not have all the information, if they did not have somebody to go back to when in doubt. So the accountability is still with the leader. So it's about stepping back and then stepping in whenever required.
Hmm. And we started this conversation talking about how we're going to build awesome workplaces, organizations, and you know, we started that whole piece about making people feel valued as almost as sort of the start point, and we got into trust. What other ways and can we, I guess, build upon that to ensure that we're building these organizations that are productive, thriving, people feeling fulfilled, all those sort of factors that start to create this sort of awesome organization?
Yeah, so people feeling valued might still sound a little philosophical. So let me help break that down for you. Let me talk a little more pragmatic. How do you how do you decode feeling valued? Okay, I think one very simple thing is treating adults as adults, right? So when we are growing up, by the time we graduate out of college, I think our parents have been telling us that now you're grown up, stand on your own feet, make your own decisions, and I think people do take decisions with accountability. People decide what course to pursue, uh, which job offer to accept, uh, who should be my life partner, when should I start a family, when should I buy a house, what kind of car should I buy. So people do have the ability to take such decisions and be accountable for those decisions. So the people who come into the workplace are adults in this sense. I'm not talking about the age, I'm talking about definition of adults where you can take decisions and you can be accountable for those decisions. So simply treating adults as adults without forcing them to follow boarding school rules is something that will help them feel that they're valued because you're valuing their
Mm.
intellect. Another way to show how you value your people is through your words and actions. Eliminate fear of failure and fear of consequence. If the team members are encouraged to speak freely, share ideas, come up with solutions without fear of consequence, without worrying what will happen to my annual performance appraisal, if they are able to talk about, let me try this without worrying about what will happen if it fails, if you're doing that, if you're able to demonstrate that, then you're showing that you value people because you're saying that you value the intellect. And it's important for us to understand that when we hire a pair of hands, we're also hiring the brain that comes with it. So we cannot disregard the brain saying, okay, you're here only to take instructions and go ahead and work, right? The brain has to be stimulated to do its thinking. And if not, then you're creating another bigger problem. So people feel valued when they have the freedom to bring their entire self to work, in the sense with the fear of failure and fear of consequence eliminated. People feel valued when information is shared transparently and instead of giving instructions, if their ideas are sought on coming up with solutions, treating adults as adults. I think these couple of these very simple uh, concepts help in showing that you value your people in the organization.
You touched on there, this creating an environment where there's no sort of fear of recompense of what you do or your actions, which is creating that sort of psychological safety, isn't it? And that's that sort of place where you feel you can challenge, you can contribute, you can fail. Just going a bit more into that, how do we create an environment and a culture that people do feel that genuine psychological safety, that they can do these things and push the boundaries and not feel they're going to get sacked for it or whatever it may be?
Yeah. So building psychological safety is not something that can happen overnight. It's not magic. It is because we're talking about changing a mindset. It takes time. It's a journey, and we have to be conscious of that. You can't say that okay from tomorrow, guys. This is going to be a psychologically safe workplace. No, it doesn't happen because it requires time for everyone to understand what does this psychological safety really mean, and the only way to show that is to demonstrate it and to demonstrate it consistently each time, every time. So what's psychological safety all about? It's creating an atmosphere where people do not have the fear of consequence when they raise an opinion, when they share a thought, when they come up with an idea, when they have a solution. They 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 feel free to talk about it. It's not only about uh, calling out if there is a problem or a concern. It's about feeling free to be able to use their brain to come up with solutions. When people are empowered to take decisions, you start eliminating some of the unnecessary approvals. You're demonstrating psychological safety. You're letting people know that you don't need my approval for everything that you have to do. You're out there facing the customer. Just go ahead and do what you think is right for the business. It's your business. The moment you start giving these messages and consistently act in sync with the words that you're articulating, I think psychological safety becomes an experience. So I know an organization which is actually a jam and jelly manufacturer, and I was visiting their plant, and I noticed that uh, there is there are freshers out of college, interns, who are handling groups of visitors who are tourists who have come into the factory for a factory experience. And this person, a fresher, has been given the freedom to give out free samples based on a judgment he or she makes on whether this person could be a prospective customer. There's no control on how much of free samples can be given out. Now, here, this particular individual is looking at it as if she owns the business.
Mm,
So she takes a decision. She looks at this person. She says, okay, this is a prospective customer. And I'm
mm,
going to be generous with this customer so that this customer leaves with a great feeling about this company and will go back and will buy our products. The decision is happening at the edge of the organization, not, not in an ivory tower where the managers sit. And she's not going back for any approval at all. In fact, I experienced that. My daughter was curious to see how strawberry jam is manufactured, and she took a dozen strawberries, made a jam, and she said, "Okay, have a taste." And we tasted a little bit, and she said, "All this is yours." And we had a bottle of jam.
wow.
Now, the business is not looking at this bottle of jam being given away as a freebie, but they're looking at the experience I carried back and how that's
Mm,
going to translate into loads of money because I'm going to keep buying that product because I see that decision making there is not restricted. That's what is
mm.
impacting me. It's really not only the quality of the product, right? What I'm carrying back with me is an experience of how people are treated.
And that experience is important in an organization, isn't it? Like, at the front
Absolutely.
end of the customer experience, it should be the same energy and focus should be on in the organization as leaders create those experiences. And it goes back to what has been saying, that trust piece again, and that sense of and that role modeling. Psychological safety is role modeled. People see that a leader happily says, "Oh, I made a mistake here because I was trying to do something new and push the boundaries, but here's what my learning is." Or challenge, they see them challenging their senior people in the business. That's role modeling where they feel, okay, if he can do it, it feels that's good for me to do it. And it's I think people, as you say, it's not a day one to day two you're now psychologically safe. It's not like some sort of test and you're there. It's actually through
Yeah.
experience, through time.
Yes.
One of the other aspects that you say that will help build organizations, we've talked about trust, but this whole sense of transparency. And I'd like you just to sort of expand a bit more about why that would help organizations become really great.
Sure. So again, how do you build trust? How do you demonstrate? Because you're hiring a lot of people. We start with being strangers, and then we become co-workers, and then we get to know each other. But how do you build trust in the process? There are very subtle, small things like uh, listening with empathy, not being judgmental. Now, that's all that is, at the initial stages when you're getting to know the employee, when you're getting to know the individual, both the business and the people are getting to know each other. So you can start with those small conversations, empathy conversations, where you first listen to why somebody behaved in a particular manner, why a particular decision was taken, without being judgmental. That's one way. How do you build trust through transparency? Is, are you willing to share company information, financial information, right down to the junior most worker? And it's not just about sharing information. What's more important than that is, are you willing to share information in a way that it is understood? Every single worker, is he or she able to connect the dots between the work output that he or she gives? How is it translating to a business outcome? Right? If information is shared so transparently, then you're actually trusting, you're showing that you trust people and their capability, and people don't see anything hidden. It's all out there in front. Another way of being transparent is where decisions are made in the board meetings, right, in the leadership meetings. And in traditional organizations, what happened is the final outcome, the decision taken, is cascaded down through layers, right? What does the bottommost person in the value chain look at it as? So the junior most person in the value chain looks at it as a decision that has got cascaded through several layers, several levels. So by the time it is reaching him or her, he feels that many people have had a part to play in cutting down. So, for example, there is a bonus announced. This happened very recently. Somebody said that I know that the managing director had actually sanctioned a much larger amount, but by the time it got filtered through so many layers,
Mm,
people eliminated fractions of it, and what I have got is a very small amount. That's a perception because they do not know what's happening. So, how about opening up the decision making meetings to people? Now, technology has made that possible. You don't have to
mm,
transport everyone to your leadership meetings. Share the recording. Have a couple of them attend the meetings, log in and attend the meeting, see what's happening. So
mm,
even if the organization is going through a crisis, there needs to be a pay cut. What the people will see is why there is a pay cut. The
mm,
acceptance is much more, the resistance is much less. Instead, if the decision for a pay cut is taken there and it is only the decision is communicated without the rationale,
mm,
without them seeing the discussions that happened, without them seeing what the business leaders are going through in order to manage the business, they'll think that it's a pay cut, but you guys out there sitting in the ivory tower are enjoying everything. So being very transparent about the why of decision, that's
mm,
what we call as transparency. And uh, breaking down silos. When work flows from one department to another, there are challenges that departments face, but very often we hear people not understanding the other department's challenge and saying that, yeah, they take it very easy, and unless I follow up it doesn't happen. But on the other
mm,
hand, they would say that, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I'm already sitting on, and my decision is going to take time because I have to wait for these further approvals. So if silos are broken down, if people start talking to each other about the challenges, what are their roadblocks, and how his or her work is impacting the other person's work, I think that's transparency.
mm,
So transparency helps in reducing the vertical power distance, like the board meetings example that I gave, and also the horizontal power distance between departments. So breaking silos both vertically and horizontally reduces the power distance, and that
mm.
kind of transparency helps build trust.
That's a great insight and I think really helpful. When we're thinking about transparency, how do we determine the boundary of how transparent we are? And it's that it'd be interesting because people say, "Well, you can't be transparent with everything." And how do we do that judgment call? It's quite tricky, isn't it?
Yeah, so this always amuses me because yeah, I've been guilty of it myself too. Till the time I got a realization that this is just a myth. Very often we start off thinking that people are not going to understand this because they're just fresh out of college. He or she's not going to get this right because even if I give the information, he won't be able to take a decision because he's got much less experience than me. These are dangerous starting points. I think it's very important for us to first get away from this assumption that people cannot take decisions, right? So that's one thing which will open our minds to be able to share information transparently, right? And we're also sitting with this very comfortable under this myth that information does not go out. Honestly speaking, in the digital age, in the information era, it's very easy to get information through direct sources, through indirect sources. So there's really no big secret out there, right? So it makes sense to share information transparently in a way that people can understand and use that information for taking decisions.
Mm,
However, there'll always be people who challenge me saying that, what about trade secrets? Yeah, obviously, you're not going to share trade secrets openly. You're going to go out there and say, this is a trade secret. Use this with discretion and trust that people will use discretion,
mm,
right? There are people who will still challenge me saying, how can I trust that people will use discretion? What if information leaks? But like I said, trust is not something which happens overnight.
mm,
If you have built psychological safety, if you have been transparent, if you have trusted their capability, if you have trusted their integrity, and they have seen you demonstrating that again and again and again. Now, when you're at a point where you have to share a trade secret and you tell them that this is a trade secret, share it with discretion. They're already in that space where they feel they belong, they own this company as much as you do, and they will share it with discretion.
Mm.
The point is build that maturity slowly, consistently by
Mm.
demonstrating that you trust. Yeah, there could always be some black sheep somewhere, but how many black sheep do we find? And for that one black sheep, is it right to punish the other 100? No.
Mm.
So that's what we have to think about. So build trust through transparency, build psychologically safe space, and then figure out what information and how much information you will share. But what's really important, especially when you're sharing financial information, it's important to share in such a simple manner that people are able to join the dots and connect their work
Mm.
outputs with the business outcomes.
Mm. And I guess what we're saying here is that transparency becomes almost a fuel for trust, doesn't it? Because the more
Absolutely.
transparent you are, the more trusting you are, because there's elements of trust with transparency as well. And it actually, in a positive way, creates that greater trust. Because,
Absolutely.
yeah, so that's really good,
Absolutely.
actually.
Absolutely. Treating adults as adults and transparency. I think they are the elements of trust.
Well, Harini, thank you for your sort of thoughts on how we can build awesome workplaces through valuing people, but also creating that trust and using the whole aspects of transparency through our leadership. It's been great. I really appreciate that. If people are interested in what you do and want to connect with you and want to get in touch with you, what's the best way of doing that?
Um, Harini Sreenivasan is my name. It's on the screen, and the best way to reach out to me is on LinkedIn. Message me on LinkedIn, and I live by a mission of responding very quickly. Julian, you must have seen that. So I do that
Yes.
unless I'm at work in a session or in a meeting. But I think that's the best way to reach out to me. I do keep sharing small micro blogs on LinkedIn. I'll be happy if people are willing to get into a conversation by commenting on those because I value comments. I read every comment, and that will enrich me as well. So I look forward to a great interaction on LinkedIn, easiest way to reach out, and happy to share my email address and have a conversation anytime.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for your time today, Harini.
Pleasure was all mine, Julian. I thoroughly enjoyed speaking about a subject which is so close to my heart.